Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me here tonight. I am so excited to be here and I'm so excited to be teaching this webinar because it's something that I have been teaching people for so long. And I just think it's a great topic. And I've really been just like really looking forward to teaching you how to help your kids. So, just to introduce myself, my name is Jamie Spencer, also known as Miss Jamie OT. And I want to just apologize for a second. I have a new computer and I'm just getting used to what the screen looks like and how to share everything. Yay, I'm in. Okay, great. So if you are commenting and you see that it says Facebook user, do me a favor, just go to StreamYard.com/Facebook. Oh, hey, Brian. StreamYard.com/Facebook and give it permission to use your name or show your name. So this way, if you have a comment, I'm able to address you and see what your name is so that I know who you are and you're in my group, and I appreciated it. So I'm just getting a comment from my virtual assistant asking me if I'm having issues. Can you all see me? Okay, so people are answering. Lots of Facebook users. Guys, go to StreamYard.com/Facebook. Just give them permission to use your name so that I'm able to see who you are. I'm really excited that you're all here. Okay. Are you guys able to see my slides? Yes, I can see you and hear you. Awesome. Okay. And you can see my slides too? My new screen is a little funny. Oh, there we go. That's better. Okay. The slides look tiny to me, so I don't want you to not be able to see them. Thank you, Rachel. She's on it, answering all my questions. So I am going to answer questions a little during this webinar, but I don't want to kind of interrupt our mojo, and they do look so small. Okay, yeah. Whoop. What is the best link to see the webinar? So some people are saying they can see the slides and some people aren't. I'm wondering if you have a Wi-Fi issue. Unfortunately, it says Facebook user. I'm not sure who you are. Bethany Jose, you need it to be much bigger or that was much bigger? Ah. Man. Katie Lacasse knows my problems. Present mode is better. Okay. So we're going to get started. And the name of this webinar is How and Why to Teach Letter Formations in Groups. Many teachers and parents and therapists are in the old tradition of teaching letters the traditional way, which is the A to Z sequence, but that doesn't always work. So I'm here to help you to teach it in a different way and to get more accomplished in less time. My name's Jamie Spencer. I'm a school-based occupational therapist for 20 years. I can't even believe that, but it's very true. So I have been a school-based OT for 20 years, and I have been working with many of my students on handwriting. Of course, we are not handwriting teachers, and any OT will tell you that we get very upset when people refer to us that way. But many of our students do have issues with handwriting, and it's because they have issues with other things. But there are many ways to teach handwriting that are easier. So my mission is to help you to help your kids. And that is the reason that I have an occupational therapy blog. And it's the reason that I do these webinars, because I know that there are so many new therapists who may be struggling for ideas, or parents who want to help their children and just aren't really sure how, or teachers who are so stressed about the pressures that are on them, about the curriculum that they're supposed to be keeping up with, and then looking at their kids and seeing developmentally where the kids are at. It's really a stressful situation. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Before we get started, I just want to let you know, if you have any issues, if you try to download something and it doesn't work, if you aren't able to get your CEU certificate quickly enough, or something's not working exactly right, please email me at customerservice@missjamieot.com. Unfortunately, in this day in technology, I have so many different, I have a Facebook Messenger, I have an email address, I have a Miss Jamie OT email address. And sometimes after something like this, I'd find people had messaged me in some random way, and I don't get the messages for a while because it's not where I'm directing everyone. So don't hunt me down on Facebook and send me a message. Email me at customer service, and then I can make sure that you get taken care of right away. That's important to me. It's hard for me to keep up with all those different streams. So if there's anything you need, customer service at missjamieot.com, and I will hook you up with whatever it is that you need. Before we get started, I want to just talk about the CEUs and the slides. So this is a free webinar. Anyone who's in this group is able to see it, which is fantastic. I'm so excited that you're here. You're able to see it, and you're able to see it for free. However, some of us occupational therapy practitioners, we need CEUs. So if that's something that you're looking for, if you'd like to get CEUs for the 2 hours that we're going to be here, you can get them. They are AOTA approved, and you can get them on my website. So if you just go to missjamieot.com/products, it's listed right there, and it's called CEUs, and you'll also get a copy of the slides. We won't be getting a copy of the slides if you don't buy the CEUs. However, everybody is going to get this freebie packet. So the link is going to be posted. It actually is posted in the Facebook group. We're going to post it in the notes on the YouTube page as well. The freebie packet is a 32-page packet of handwriting practice sheets that you can use to teach letters in groups. And I'm going to be showing a lot of them as we go through this webinar. You can also get a workbook. So the 32-page packet is kind of the basics. It's condensed. The versions and the letters groups that are the easiest to teach together are there for you, but it doesn't include all the letters because some letters really you can't group with another letter. So if you're looking for something that's more comprehensive, if you want something that addresses all of the letters and numbers too, then you can check out my workbook. It's Teaching Letter Formations in Groups workbook, and that's on sale right now, and that's in my shop as well. So I'm just going to make the screen smaller for a second. Unfortunately, when I'm making the slides smaller, I'm unable to see the comments. My logo is almost half the screen where the slides are. Oh, someone's telling me about the present mode. Okay. I think we should be, was that better just now when I had the screen really large? But I can't see the screen, so I can't see your comments. So Dana Wilson is asking, how do I download the slides and materials for this webinar? I purchased, but can't see where to download. So when you purchased, you should have gotten a receipt immediately with the link. It's right there in your download. If it's possible that you were blocked, or I hope that you would check your spam. Sometimes things, because it's coming from a business, go right to your spam, and then you're unable to access it. So check your spam, Dana Wilson. And if it's not there, email us at customerservice@missjamieot.com, and we'll get you what you need, okay? And you can do that right now because my fantastic and fabulous, wonderful assistant, Kim, is manning the boards, and she'll answer anything that you have. Inger is also saying she couldn't download. So Inger, just email customer service for me, okay? Appreciate it. Okay, so going forward, how to teach the letters in groups. Present mode. Sorry, guys. Here we go. In your freebie packet is this amazing little cheat sheet. I guess it's cheat sheets about how to teach the letters in developmental order. So typical handwriting instruction is from A to Z, but developmental order focuses more on strokes that are similar and strokes that children are able to make at what age. So this little cheat sheet is a great reference. It's an awesome handout too for parents or for teachers to let them know what letters go together and what letters are easiest to teach together. So this 2-page handout is a part of your freebie packet. So the reason that this webinar, in my opinion, is needed, and research shows as well, there's a lot less time for handwriting instruction. If you have children, you're probably seeing that. If you're a teacher, you definitely know that that's what's going on. There's so many things in our kids' curriculum nowadays that, unfortunately, the time that used to be spent on handwriting is getting like condensed and condensed to be smaller and smaller. So it's really tricky for teachers to fit it in because they're under a lot of pressure to teach these other things. And very often their livelihood depends on it because teachers are evaluated based on kids' test scores. And we don't test kids in handwriting. We test them in math and reading and things like that. So you can see why handwriting comes lower and lower down on the totem pole. There's just less time in the day for handwriting instruction. So teaching the letters in groups, you get more done in less time, which obviously is efficient and helps you to get more done with all of your children in your short day. Research also shows that children are often forced to move on too quickly. They haven't mastered basic writing tasks, but the next day they're forced to move on to something else. And this is likely the cause of most handwriting problems. This is what research says. A lot of research articles have commented on the fact that kids aren't mastering basic writing tasks, and then it doesn't even matter because the next day or the next week, they're just pushed to the next thing. And we can see then why our children don't become successful at it and why it becomes a source of stress or maybe even frustration for them. This method of teaching letters in groups and teaching them based on developmental appropriateness is effective. And it's effective because it's universal. You can use it no matter what handwriting program your school is using, your teacher is using. If you have a handwriting book from a different program, you can still use this method and use your book. It's okay. It doesn't matter. It's just kind of looking at it from the big picture of how to teach it and in what order. And it goes with any program. It doesn't matter if you're using Handwriting Without Tears, if you're using Zane or Blozer, Size Matters handwriting program. There's so many different programs out there, and they all have their benefits. But this method of teaching it in this order and grouping them can really help. It also saves a lot of time, and it's practical. It works for teachers, it works for parents, and it works for therapists, and it's research-based. So we're going to talk more about that research and about the motor learning theory and about motor planning and how it impacts handwriting. But research does show that this is an effective way to teach handwriting. We are building on prior learning when we teach handwriting in groups because we teach children one stroke or one movement, and then we follow up by teaching them another step to change it into a new letter. We'll talk more about that as we go forward. I'm just going to quickly look. Everyone is asking questions. Dana, it was in the junk mail. Awesome. I don't know why so many email addresses love to send me to their junk, but they do. It's okay. But always, that's just good information for everybody. If you are downloading something from any business site and it's not coming through, always check your spam. It's almost always there. They like to put us in the garbage. The webinar will be available for about 6 weeks. So if you have to leave and you can't stay, don't worry about it. You can come back to this group and see it later on. The link for the freebie package is in this group on the Facebook page. Okay. Moving forward. Universal, practical, and builds on prior learning. The objectives that we're going to cover today. We're going to identify 4 reasons why teaching letter formations in groups is more effective than the old way. A to Z, it works, I guess, but this is more effective. And I've found through 20 years of experience that it's definitely more helpful and more fun for the kids. I find that it saves time for the teachers as well, and that is always a crowd pleaser. We're going to recognize which letter formation should be taught together. We'll go over capital and lowercase. And we're going to understand that motor planning plays a big role in handwriting development. So if you have a child that has difficulty learning any new skill that requires sequential movements, think planning how to ride a bike, learning a dance, learning anything that requires multiple movements, even zipping up a jacket, that all takes motor planning. And handwriting requires motor planning too. Research shows that handwriting dysfunction is occurring in 25 to 33% of school-age children. Now, this reference is from 2013. I was a little mad at myself when I just saw that because I know there's more updated references, but I was kind of lumping all my references and all my resources about this together. And so many of the articles are saying that a quarter of our kids are struggling with handwriting. That's a lot of children. And in the old days, it used to not be a big deal. I don't know if your family tells stories about how they used to get smacked on the hand for not having proper penmanship. Nowadays, it's very commonplace. It's really not a big deal. And occupational therapy practitioners are often referred to children who have issues with handwriting. But we're generally referred children who have special needs, which is appropriate. If you have a child with handwriting issues, it doesn't mean just, refer them to OT. They have OT issues. Very often they just need proper instruction. They just need a little more time to master the skill before being forced to move on. But children with special needs may also have motor issues. They may have visual perceptual issues, eye-hand coordination issues, vision issues. We're really not exactly sure what's going on, but that can trickle down to leading to handwriting problems. But we have to remember that typical developing kids have trouble with it too. So Hoy et al. Wrote this article that had tons of good tidbits in it. If you're looking for a reference article to read, I definitely suggest this one. He said it's reasonable to believe that improvements in letter quality precede improvements in speed, which makes so much sense. Once they learn how to make the letter correctly and legibly, down the road, they're going to get faster. And getting faster requires more practice. He says that at least twice a week for 20 minutes is the minimum amount of time required to benefit from handwriting instruction. So I, a couple of years ago, did a huge handwriting research project in my school district, and I have to admit, it was really fun. We compared 3 different handwriting programs, and it was 26 different teachers. I think it was 26. It was a while ago now. But 26 different teachers all trained in different handwriting programs. And one program did make a little bit more progress than the others, but all of the children made progress. And the end result showed us that as long as kids are having practice and formal handwriting instruction, and it's something that is a part of their curriculum and a part of their day, then they will make progress. We do need to fit in that handwriting practice. It is important. And Hoy says at least twice weekly for 20 minutes. Handwriting without tears, I think, suggests a little bit shorter and more often. It's up to you, but you do want to make sure that you are fitting it in on a consistent basis. So teaching letter formations in groups, it helps us to save time because we're teaching more than one thing at a time. It increases efficiency because, again, we're teaching more than one thing at one time. And we're building on previous learning. Teachers use scaffolding very often, which means they teach a little bit of information, and then the next day they teach a little more. And that is what scaffolding is. This is very similar. We're using scaffolding as well as motor planning to teach children our letter formations. We're going to start with a little bit and get them to be successful at it before we move on into the next step. We always want to give our kids that just right challenge because we want them to feel successful. And research also shows that if our kids don't feel successful in handwriting, or if they have a hard time, they may get discouraged and they may start writing less, including less information into their work, which then impacts their grades. So it's important. And teaching letter formations in groups also relies on motor planning and motor memory. And we'll be talking a little bit more about that. This method really fits into a school curriculum so perfectly. As we said before, there's not enough time in the day. These teachers are miracle workers. They're angels. They're teaching so many things in just such a short day. They have so much to cover, and they have kids of all different levels. So teaching things in a way that is a little bit faster and builds motor memory just is a ticket to success. It just fits right into the school curriculum because it's faster and it's easier and it helps the kids learn it faster. So that is why it just works. So I really wanted to drive that home. It also is a great way to practice handwriting with younger children in an RTI group. If you have response to intervention, children who need to improve their handwriting and motor skills and maybe even their reading, very often handwriting is incorporated into those lessons or into those groups. And putting them into groups is a great way to, again, to cover more base area. There's so much to cover. If you're doing more than one letter at once, you're getting it all done, which is amazing. I love to accomplish more than one thing at one time, and I know a lot of other teachers are the same way. I'm going to tell a story about two little cheerleaders. Aren't they so cute? So the little girl on the left is Francesca, and the little girl on the right is Grace. They both were dying to become cheerleaders. They couldn't even wait. They had to wait until a certain age until their mom could sign them up. But they waited and waited, and they got signed up. They got their uniforms. They were thrilled, bursting with excitement for their first day. Couldn't wait to be like their big sister, like the older, cool girl down the street who does cheerleading. Just over the moon excited about this new endeavor and that they were about to be a big kid and become a cheerleader. And here's what happened. Francesca went to cheerleading camp and she learned the first cheer. It was called Victory. It was short and she felt okay about it. When she went home, she practiced it on her own and she showed her mom how well she did. She showed her big sister. She did pretty well. The second day, she was really excited to show her coach what she'd learned and to learn the rest of the cheer. But on the second day, they learned a whole new cheer. So Francesca was really frustrated and she was upset and she almost cried. I thought I was doing so well. I couldn't wait to show off how well I was doing with the last cheer. But now this is a whole new cheer. And to be honest, learning the first cheer was a little tricky and she had to really practice it when she got home. But now she's learning a whole new cheer and she kind of forgot what yesterday's cheer was about. She decided to put her best foot forward. She went to cheer camp on the third day and she learned another cheer. So now she'd been taught 3 different cheers in 3 days. And to be honest, they were all kind of jumbled up in her head. She hadn't had enough practice in any of them to get good at it. So she felt completely dejected and she decided she didn't want to be a cheerleader anymore. She told her mom, "Mom, I'm just not good at it." So she felt frustrated and her self esteem kind of plummeted. Then we have Grace. Grace felt exactly the same way as Francesca, couldn't wait to go to cheerleading camp. On her first day, the coach taught her the same cheer, Victory. She was really excited about it too. She went home, she practiced, she showed her dad and her big brother. She was all thrilled about it, running around the house in her little cheerleading costume. On the second day, she went back to cheerleading camp. Her coach had all the kids practice the same cheer from yesterday. They went through it a few times to make sure that everyone felt successful. And then the coach went to each child, and anyone who was doing a step wrong or having a little trouble with something, she made sure that they understood and that they got it right. At the end of the practice, they learned a new step to that cheer. The following day, they went back and they practiced the cheer from day 1 and the new steps from day 2. Grace did an awesome job. She totally understood the cheer. She practiced it when she got home and she felt successful. She got it. She was able to practice and master what she was doing so that she could become successful. So it makes sense. Then we have to look at our kids and think about what are we teaching them and what are we expecting of them when we kind of rush through things? How are they going to feel successful? So I'm having a little trouble seeing some of the comments. The last comment I see is at 8:22. Can somebody comment if you're able to hear me? I just want to make sure that the connection is okay. I'll take a little sip of water while we wait. I'm not having any comments. Uh-oh. Oh, okay, Rachel. Rachel, I'm loving you today. Thank you. Okay. Thanks, everybody. I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure that everything was going right. I would hate it if you couldn't hear me and I'm talking to myself in the basement. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the presentation. So again, if we confuse our kids, we're going to lose them. If you confuse them, you will lose them. Doesn't that make so much sense? It's the same for anything else. I mean, I felt like this. I'll tell a personal story that's very similar to the cheerleading story. I decided I was going to try out Zumba and I was all excited about it. And I got a new outfit and I was going to really just, burn so many calories and become a good dancer. And oh my goodness, it was horrible. I couldn't do it. It was so hard. Everybody was doing all these different moves over and over. Nothing was repeated and I couldn't get it. I was totally confused and I did not go back to Zumba. I mean, I can understand why kids feel that way, and that's how I felt as well. So we have to make sure that our kids get it. We've got to make sure that they master what we're teaching them before we move on. Motor planning is a huge part of our everyday life. It's the potential to organize and plan a goal-directed movement. It's a high priority prerequisite for any sequential movement. So we're going to think about all the things that we do. Like I just talked about Zumba. Think about all the different movements and plannings. If you've ever been to Zumba, if you haven't, I don't suggest it. But if you ever did anything like that, think of learning a new dance, or even when we all years ago learned the Macarena and it was a lot of movements, or learned clapping games when we were younger. It's a lot of different movements and sequences, and we don't get it until we practice it again and again. So motor planning is a really important skill, and it's something that needs to be replicated over and over in order for it to become easy. Transfer of learning. We want our kids to transfer over their new skills, which in this case would be writing a letter formation correctly, to a natural situation. So when we're practicing with them in, let's say, an OT room or at home for homework in the kitchen, we want our children to be able to transfer over what they've learned to a natural task like writing their name. We want them to be able to incorporate it into their everyday skills so that it becomes natural for them to write the letters correctly. And it's easier to transfer learning when the motor components are similar. We'll be talking more about that when we go into which letters go with which, but it just makes sense if you think that a child who's learned the letter R, lowercase, we start at the top, down, up, and over, it's going to be easy for them to learn the letter N. Start at the top, up, and over, and a little bit more. It's that extra kick. It's that second step to the cheer, just like happened for Grace. Motor planning and automaticity. So automaticity is a very strong predictor of handwriting speed, quality, and quantity. Remember what I said before about research showing that when children aren't skilled at writing, if it's not automatic for them and they have to really think about how to form the letters, or even if they have to think about what it is they want to write and how to get it out in terms of grammar, it's going to be a lot more work for them to finish their assignments. And when that happens, very often they end up writing less, they end up rushing through, they don't include the details in their work like they're supposed to, and this then in turn impacts their grades. So it is really important that we use motor planning to help our kids develop automaticity. When handwriting requires no effort, that's when it's automatic. But the important thing is we want it to require no thought and no effort and be legible. Sometimes kids can just buzz right through something that they need to write, but nobody can read it. And so we need to kind of get our foot in the door and work on handwriting and letter formation with our kiddos right at the beginning when they're first learning it. It's really important that we're not just expecting them to write all of these letters until we get to it. So write your name, but in a few weeks, I'll teach you those letters, because in the meantime, how many times are they going to write their name? And they're going to learn it incorrectly, and that will become automatic. So that's really important. Automaticity is usually achieved between third and fifth grade. And this is when our kids are really expected to start writing essays, they're answering data-based questions, they're taking their state exams. So it's important that they do produce great stuff. We want to know what they're really thinking. We want to know if they know the details to back up what they're saying. This is really important part of their everyday lessons. You know what I mean? I'm so excited that everybody agrees with me about Zumba. Never again. No, not for me. So when it comes to our kiddos, we need to Mr. Miyagi them. I was desperate to put a picture of Mr. Miyagi and Daniel in this webinar, but I wasn't allowed because of copyright. And because this is AOTA approved, I've got to follow all the rules. So I'm sorry. And I just want to put it right out there. If you don't know who Mr. Miyagi is, or if you've never seen The Karate Kid, stop watching this webinar and go to Netflix and get The Karate Kid. It is one of the best movies around, and it is the epitome of learning what motor planning is. So just a synopsis. Daniel is a boy who wants to learn karate. He's getting bullied at school, and he meets Mr. Miyagi, who is this little cute old man in his apartment complex who decides to teach him karate. But when Daniel goes to his house to get trained, Mr. Miyagi makes him paint the house, he makes him paint the fence, he makes him wax the car. So Daniel gets all upset. And finally, Daniel kind of blows up and says, "You were supposed to train me. What's going on here? I wanted to learn karate." And Mr. Miyagi had him go through the movements, show me wax on of the car. And Daniel did it. And he realized that he was learning, I don't know what the real words are, but karate chops. He was learning the moves. He was working out and developing motor memory and muscle memory of these important movements that he needed for karate. Mr. Miyagi said, "Show me paint the house." And Daniel did it in exact way, which was exactly what he needed to block punches. So Mr. Miyagi did it in such a secret and sneaky way that Daniel was furious. But in the end, Daniel got it because he did the same movements over and over. He learned through repetition, and he developed the motor planning that he needed in order to win the final karate championship. As I said, if you haven't seen it, you really got to go see it. It's that good. Another thing that's really important is that we can't ignore natural development. This is according to developmental appropriate guidelines. Children who are 2 years and 10 months old, so that's like this far away from being 3 years old, should be able to make a vertical line. So if you look over here at these pink lines, that's a vertical line. It's not perfect. It's not a letter. It's just a stroke. And that is developmentally appropriate for a child who's 2 years and 10 months. They should be able to take a crayon or a pencil and make a stroke down. Horizontal comes a few months later at the age of 3. It's just a stroke across. On the right side of the screen, I've got the letters that use those strokes. Not too many, but a bunch. E, F, H, I, T, lowercase I, L, and T, and numbers 1 and 4. But you can see it's not just one stroke down or one stroke over. It's a combination of a lot of them, and that's a lot trickier than just one line. When children are about 3, they also learn how to make curved lines or circles. And again, if you look at the pink line, it's a scribble. It's not a perfect curve. It's not multiple curves. It's not a beautifully scripted letter. It's just an old scribbled circle. And that's what's naturally appropriate. So we have to think, how many 3-year-olds are being asked to write their name? But really, what the only thing they should be able to do is a line down, a line across, and a circle. We have to really manage our expectations. At the same time, we have to be fair when it comes to realizing what the teachers are being expected to do as well. But look at the amount of letters that incorporate curves. A ton. That's really tricky. And it's not just curves, it's also straight lines. So it's expecting a lot of our kiddos. By the age of 4 years and 7 months, children should be able to make just a diagonal line. Just one diagonal line in either direction, not multiple diagonal lines and not diagonal lines mixed in with horizontal lines and straight lines. But sometimes they are expected to do that. These are the letters that incorporate diagonal lines. There's a lot of them. Visual milestones are another thing that's really important to consider. So this is from the Beery Developmental Test of Visual Motor Integration, and I refer back to these age-appropriate guidelines very often. So at 4.5 years, a child should be able to complete or close a simple drawing, and that's if they know what the drawing is. At 4 years, 11 months, they recognize something while only seeing a piece of it. And at 5.5, they're able to name most uppercase and some lowercase letters. So let's just think about that. 5.5 is generally, for many children, the middle of kindergarten. I know in my district, at least, most of my kids are expected to know most of the letters. And if they don't, not that it's a red flag, because the teachers, of course, know that it's not developmentally appropriate, but it is definitely something that needs to be honed in on. They need that letter recognition because they've already started learning how to read in class. At 5.11, the kids are guessing what someone is drawing when it's only partially done. So I have the picture of the house here, and we're saying basically that a child be able to look at that and say, I think you're going to draw a house. These are visual closure skills, and it does take a while for them to develop. They're not just innate. Kids don't just look at something and know exactly what it is that we are trying to say. Diagonals are diagonals are very hard for kids, and especially that the diagonal letters are not just one diagonal. It's always multiple things going on right there. It's like a lot that we're expecting of them. In terms of handwriting milestones, we talked about visual perceptual milestones, but these are handwriting milestones. By 5, a child should be able to print their first name with letters that are large, unclear, awkward, or reversed. According to the Handwriting Without Tears program, it's best to teach children how to write their name in all capitals. I know about 40 kindergarten teachers that would probably shoot me for saying that. It drives them crazy because they feel like it's something that they need to unteach. I get that. But we have to really also look at the other side. Are they going to be writing their name in all capitals when they're 40? I don't think so. So is it a giant deal? Not in my book, but I don't teach kindergarten. So I shouldn't really, not that I'm judging, I really do understand where they're coming from. But we've got to know that all throughout kindergarten, it's completely appropriate for them to mess up their name and to write it in all caps or mixed caps or anything like that. Developmentally, by 5.5, they should be able to print their first name in capital or lowercase or mixed. And then by 6 years, they're printing numbers 0 to 9 and all of the letters. By 6.1, they should be able to print 3 simple words with more than 3 letters without copying. So I put the example of the cat is brown, and I left out the spacing and I mixed up the letters because that's what's developmentally appropriate. But if we think about 6.1, that's first grade. My kindergarten kids, by the end of kindergarten, my kindergarten teachers in my district are amazing. They have these kids writing sentences, writing in notebooks, writing on regular loose leaf sometimes. I'm floored, and I have to just give them so much credit there. They're able to do that, and I know that's a lot of hard work for them, and that's great. We just have to have a little patience for those kids that find it a little bit harder than everybody else, because most of the time, those kids are not referred for extra help. So I put this big picture of rubber gloves because I try to tell parents or teachers, we've got to understand that our kids' motor skills are not like ours. They don't have perfect sensory awareness of their hands. They don't have perfect sequencing, and all of everything in their hands is not as skilled. Their dexterity is not as good as ours. It's almost like they're going through their day with a pair of rubber gloves on. So we should picture our day. Let's go through our day with a pair of rubber gloves on. I don't think I'd be able to get my earring on. I wouldn't be able to tie my shoes. I would feel pretty clumsy and I'd be having difficulty. And I'd be upset if somebody expected me to do those things and expected me to do them well. Our kids can only work with what they've got, and we've got to be aware of that. Traditions and current trends. We're going to say what's happening on both sides. The traditions are reading, writing, arithmetic. I remember when I was a little girl, we had a bulletin board in my school that said reading, writing, arithmetic, and the arithmetic started with R. It was like the 3 R's. Nowadays, it's really not the same. But back in the tradition, they also taught capital A and then lowercase a all the way through the alphabet until capital Z and lowercase z. Now, the reason that that wasn't a tragedy and it wasn't a huge issue and children still had nice handwriting was because number one, they had more time to work on handwriting. But number two, they weren't pushing handwriting in preschool. They a lot of kids weren't even going to kindergarten. 20 years ago, children in kindergarten were taking naps and playing kitchen and learning social skills. They weren't learning Common Core and all of these really tricky things that are being put in front of our little ones nowadays. So back though in those days when the kids were learning capital A and lowercase a, they were old enough to make diagonal lines. They were old enough to motor plan, and they had had enough extra play time to actually get their motor skills in shape and get their motor skills where they should be. Then we have to think about all the technology, especially with what's going on with our kids now with COVID. All of this digital learning and parents trying to work from home and having children in the house. Our kids are watching more TV and more on digital toys than ever. And nobody is blaming. I mean, we all understand we're all in the same boat, but it does impact our kids' motor skills. Back in the old days, they also used to combine reading with writing. Sometimes they do that now, but not always. The current trends are to ignore developmental appropriate practices. We are not starting to teach handwriting at 6 or 7, even though developmental experts will say that that is what would be best for our kids. It's just not feasible in the schools. We need our kids to be learning, we need them to be progressing, we need them to be reading in order to keep up with what other nations, other countries' kids are doing. So, unfortunately, we don't really have that luxury of doing what's developmentally appropriate. Also, there's such a huge focus on literacy and math. And as I said before, we've got to think about the teachers. They're often being evaluated on their kids' skills and their kids' literacy scores and their kids' math scores. They're not being evaluated on their kids' handwriting. So we can see how this would impact the way that they would prioritize their day, and we can't blame them. On top of that, administrators are focusing on those scores too. So administrators aren't, for the most part, I shouldn't, group everybody together, but when administrators are going to their administrative meetings, they're all talking about how can we improve our kids' test scores? How can we raise our children's success rates? And math, I mean, not math, but math and handwriting, math and reading often are the main focuses. Districts will spend tons and tons of money on formalized reading programs, on formalized math programs, on digital math and reading programs. And handwriting falls lower and lower down on what's important. So this, again, creates limited time for handwriting remediation. Does anybody have any questions at this point? So if you are coming up as Facebook user, just go to streamyard.com/Facebook. It's just going to ask for permission to show your name. So then I can make sure that I get in touch with you, even if not right now, but after. Okay. No questions? All right. Tanya Sirocco, everything is very clear. Thank you, Tanya. Consistency is key. So this is important for everybody. We're all on the same team, every one of us, the parents, the teachers, the therapists. We want to make sure that our kiddos are getting the same message from all of us. So this means no matter what program you're using, and as I said, with the pages that I'm giving out to you and with my workbook also, you can use any of those pages with any program. I purposely don't put a lot of language because I want you to be using the language that the child's school is using or the child's teacher is using. If you're a teacher and your school doesn't have a program, then you pick one. There are tons of great programs out there that are not that expensive, that are developmentally appropriate, that you can take the language and just stick with it. We want to make sure that we're all saying the same thing. And it is important because a lot of the programs are very different. Handwriting Without Tears will say big line and big curve and little curve, while Size Matters handwriting program will say slanting forward line and slanting backward line, or size 1 letter and size 2 letters. It's important that we're not confusing our kids with all that language, especially when we have to consider that many of our children who do have handwriting issues have special needs. They might have an IEP, and that means they might have speech and language issues. So we don't want to be bombarding them with all different instructions and all different language that they need to conquer, master, and understand. If you're a therapist, if you're not employed directly by your school district, you might not be sure what handwriting program your school is using. please ask. It's really important. And I hope to God that your school is using all one program to make it easier for you and easier for the children. But it is important that you're following through with whatever that teacher is doing. You can ask them if they have a sheet of the language. I know Handwriting Without Tears and also the TV teacher, they have a sheet on their website for free that has the language for each letter that you could just print out and use like as a cheat sheet. And that's a very helpful, and it's great for having right by the homework table when we're working with our kids. And the language is important too. Different programs use different paper. You want to be consistent. On the other hand, we do need to teach our children to generalize to different kinds of paper because, hey, let's face it, they're not going to be using that paper from Mrs. Smith's kindergarten class when they're 40, but we want to say what's developmentally appropriate for them right now, and let's all use it. When we're ready to help them transition to a new kind of paper, let's all be on the same page. And that can be really tricky because parents are so busy, teachers are so busy, therapists are usually running around crazy from school to school, from class to class. The only thing that's good about this digital learning that's been kind of forced upon us is that there's more room for collaboration digitally. So if someone's using a resource and they're all in the same Google Classroom, it's really helpful to see what someone else is using. I know that that's been happening with me and the teachers that I work with as I'm finding a great worksheet that I love, or I've been using these rainbow writing sheets that are in your freebie packet. I've been sharing them with my teachers, and with a click of a button, I'm able to also put them on my Google Classroom, which makes me so happy because I'm kind of killing two birds with one stone, but I'm also helping all my kids, whether they're in school or at home. And we want to make sure that everybody knows that the kids have to practice. Not forever, not that long, just a little bit. A little bit every day makes a huge, huge difference. So one of our objectives is to recognize which letter formations and numbers should be taught together. And I put these letters here on the two sides just to make an example of the similarities and the differences between letters that are similar in formation and letters that are sequential, like A to Z. So if we look at the F and the E, we can see that they're very, very similar. Big line down, back to the top, little line, and then the next day or a couple days later, when we go to teach our child E, it's just one more line. It reminds us back of Francesca and Grace. If we teach them one little thing, and then when they're ready for a new skill, we scaffold or go up the step and teach them one little more piece, and now our child is successful at two letters. It's just so much easier. If we look at lowercase, C, A, and D, they all start with the letter C. So if we teach our kids the letter C and they get really good at it, and then the next day we teach them, we're going to change the C into an A. Handwriting Without Tears calls this magic C. Size Matters calls this super C. I don't know if TV Teacher has a name for it, but in general, they do developmentally teach, let's learn the letter C, and then we're going to take that knowledge that we have and we're going to add a little piece to it, up, down, and now we know C and A. Once we get those down, we're going to do one other thing, make the C again, and by now the kids are very comfortable with it. Hopefully they've got it down to start at the top, go around, up, and then for D, we're going up a little more and back down. It's the same movements with a tiny twist. That's much easier to learn than what we're going to talk about right now. Capital A, first of all, starts with a diagonal. As we know, those are the hardest lines for the kids to make. Horizontal and vertical lines are much easier. But A, the first letter of the alphabet, has diagonals going in both directions, as well as a little line across. If we have our kids learning capital A, and then a few days later, they're learning lowercase a, we're going to look at the motor components. So capital A is a diagonal, a line across. Then lowercase a is a little curve and a line down. Those have nothing to do with one another. They don't build on each other at all. The only thing that's similar about them is their sound. So this doesn't need to be part of a handwriting lesson because handwriting doesn't always go with sound. We can definitely talk about what sounds the letters make, but they don't need to be grouped together in that manner. If we look at capital B is a tall letter and it starts at the top, goes down, has two small curves, and then lowercase b is a big line down with one small curve. So it's a similar formation, but it's not taking what I learned yesterday and adding a little something more like the other way. So the letters that we have on the left side of the screen here, F and E and C and A and D, they're examples of teaching letters in groups by scaffolding and by building upon using motor learning and motor planning. The other is the traditional method, which, as I said, kids were learning back when they were 6 or 7, and they were mastering it okay because they had plenty of time for practice, and also they were old enough to get it. Their bodies were ready. They might not have been wearing the rubber gloves. These are our capital letters. Now, this developmental order is in the cheat sheet in your freebie, it doesn't have to be set in stone. You don't have to go, this is it, and there's no changing around. If the child has a letter in their name that you want them to learn faster, it's okay to try to change it up, but you want to be conscientious of the letter strokes that are involved in the letter, and then also where the letters start or the start spot. So our straight line letters are F and E, and then we have our line and curve letters, and this is the order that we're teaching them in. Our line and curve letters are a straight line and something curved. Then we have our pencil pickup diagonals. So it might be confusing. Why is N and M not taught with V, W, X, Y, Z? Because when we learned F and E and then D, P, B, and R, we taught our kids that we start up here, we go down, and then we pick our pencil back up. Now, the reason that we're asking our kids for capital letters to pick their pencil up is because they don't have the motor control to trace back up neatly. And when they move over a little bit because their line ends up a little wonky because they don't have the motor control, there ends up a big hole or what we call a gap. And that ends up looking messy. It's not as legible as it could be. So for capitals, which are very infrequently used, we teach our children to pick up for those letters. Now, when we get to N and M, we're still using that first stroke. We're starting at the top, going down, hopping back to the top, and then we make the rest of our letter. The other diagonals, V, W, X, Y, and Z, don't pick up. They start, make their diagonals, and keep going. So that is why they're separate, and I hope that that makes sense. We can teach by start spot or strokes, or start spot and strokes. Our unique uppercase letters, so H and K and L and U, they don't really go exactly with any group, but they're not hard to put with another group. It would be very easy to put L with F and E if you wanted, or you could teach L by itself. But H, K, and L and U all start at the top corner, whereas the letters on the bottom, center starting, A, I, T, and J, they start in the middle. So we're kind of still following a trend. Here's where we start. We start with a big stroke down, and then we move on to make the rest of our letter. That's called sequence, how we formulate the rest of the letter after starting it. When we get to diagonals, they're not picking up their pencil anymore. We want them to start in that corner again, and then they're going to finish the stroke. So we can see V and W, so easy to teach together. It's basically the same thing twice. So once they learn it, they just add another stroke, and now they've got two letters. X and Y are similar, but not identical, but it's still the same start spot and stroke. Many children for capital Y, I always put capital Y and sometimes lowercase y as a trickier letter or a more difficult letter to make, because many kids see that little V at the top of their Y and they want to make a V because they see it. And we've been teaching them to look at things they recognize and form it. But with Y, it's supposed to be a short line and then a long line. That's less lines, and it ends up again with less gaps. If our kid goes like this and then comes back down, picks up and makes a stroke down, sometimes it's not perfect. Not that it matters, but when they get more comfortable and they're writing it over and over and over and over, it ends up impacting the legibility of what they're doing. We have our starts with C letters. This is capital C. Then we teach them to take their capital C and turn it into a capital O. Then they practice C again, and they practice turning it into a G. And then they practice turning it into a Q, which is just an O with a line. Looks a little funky on my slide here, but that's not how we teach our kids to make it. And then S. You can teach kids to make S by starting with a small c and then turn around and go home, or whatever the language is of the program that the child is using. It's the same movement, just then going another way afterwards. Then we have our center starting letters. They don't, I and T and J are easy to group together because they all start with similar strokes, but A is all out on his own. I don't know why it's the first letter of the alphabet. He's totally individual and standing out and making trouble because he's not like any of the other letters. So Dana Schachter Ball is saying that she likes to teach L, E, F, H, T, and I together. And it also works well with geoboards and building letters. I agree. I love using geoboards to teach letters. So geoboards, if you're not familiar, it's like a plank of wood with almost like nails sticking out of it. And then the kids can stretch rubber bands to make letters or shapes or anything like that. And it's great for practicing letters, especially capital. Looking at the letters that we can group together. We can do it in different ways. As I said, it doesn't have to be set in stone. It's okay to do it the way it works for you. You want to make sure that you're incorporating that child's handwriting program. But if you want to teach T and then I, that's fine. Or if you want to teach T and then J, you can do it that way too. But it's all the same movement. So if we go again back to that cheer, we're learning one movement, which would be the T, and then we're going to add something. So for J, we're adding a little hook at the bottom. And for I, we're adding a little line at the bottom. It's such a tiny little twist, but again, we are scaffolding and building on something that they've already learned to make it much easier for them. And then they feel successful. So when I teach handwriting, I always make sure to emphasize where the letter starts. So many children start their letters at the bottom. And this is actually an interesting little tidbit that I read somewhere, that Freud says that our children start their letters at the bottom very naturally because it goes back to ego, and they think that the whole world centers around them. And so when they go to make a letter or a shape or anything, they start it at them and go away. So I think that that's very interesting because most children, it is their natural instinct to start at the bottom. And it's a habit that we need to break for them. But there have been studies that showed that starting at the top, if you compare, is easier and it helps the children write faster, which then pushes forward to that automaticity and increased legibility. It all goes together. At the bottom of this sheet right here is boxes. I also like to use boxes to teach my kids the size of the letters and also where they go on the lines. We don't want the kids having their letters hanging off the lines or floating all over the lines. And I find that giving them boxes to stay within or boundaries is a great way to do that. You can also use wiki sticks or anything like that, but it's easy just to draw it. And there's even actually fonts online that you can download that will give you anything that you type, and it gives you the boxes for it. So that's very fun. Also, puzzlemaker.com has a section where you can put in your spelling words of the week or anything like that, and it will give it to you in those boxes so the kids can practice sizing, which is fun. This is one of my favorite ways to teach letter formation. I call it rainbow writing. I've seen teachers do something that they call rainbow writing that seemed a little different to me. So I'm not sure if rainbow writing is actually what I say it is or what they say it is. But I've seen where teachers are teaching a spelling word and they let the kids write each letter in a different color, and that it's supposed to help them remember that THE spells the. But when I'm teaching letter formation, and I started doing this a really long time ago with this little boy that I had, and he like melts my heart. He was one of my favorite students ever. His name was John. And he was really like a little guy. So his hands were littler. He had weak motor skills, and he was definitely struggling with handwriting a lot more than the other children in his special kindergarten class. But when I tried to get him to learn how to write, and his motor skills were pretty delayed. He was probably functioning motor-wise at a 3-year-old level, but he was in kindergarten, so he's expecting to be writing his letters and learning how to write his name and all those other things. He didn't want any part of it. He didn't feel successful. He didn't like it. He, fought me tooth and nail. Even though he was the biggest sweetheart ever, he really was like, Miss Jamie, I don't want to do it. So what we came up with, what was our compromise, was that I would pick 5 crayons or 6 crayons, whatever it was, and I would put them on his left side because he was lefty, and he had to make the letters that I put in front of him in the first color. So he has to make all of the letters in that color. I don't like the kids to switch crayons in between letters because they end up spending more time picking colors than they do actually writing. So I make it a habit of, we pick one color, let's say red. I want you to make the F. We're going to concentrate on making it properly. Now I want you to make the E with the red crayon. Okay, you're done with it. Now you can put the red crayon on the other side. We are done with red. Now we're going to go to the next letter. So using that, the child sees the light at the end of the tunnel. They see, okay, when I get to orange, I'm done with this tedious task. But they're also practicing each letter 5 times. And when you're grouping the letters together in the way that goes with their sequencing or their letter formation, they're really practicing it more because the letters build upon each other. So this is one of my go-to ways to teach handwriting. I find that you can make it fun. If you use the letters in outline, you can just use them a million ways. You can have the children ray Play-Doh and fit them in the lines to learn F and then E. You can have the children cut wiki sticks or bend-a-roos and make the letters and then write them. Anything that you can do to get our kids to recognize the similarities between the letters so that it carries over when they are writing them. Does anybody have any questions? What's the name of the website that makes boxes on worksheets? It's puzzlemaker.com. They have a ton of different, I guess, activities that you can do. You could make crossword puzzles. You could make word searches with the spelling words that you want, but there is an option to make boxes in that size. I'm like 90% sure that it's puzzlemaker.com. If it isn't, I would get back to you, but it says Facebook user. So go to streamyard.com/Facebook so I can make sure that I get in touch with you about that answer, just in case I'm wrong. I will also post it in the group afterwards. Someone's asking, why did programs drop the line on the top for J? I don't know. I'm really not sure. I think it works either way. As Jamie, I catch myself, I write it both ways. I don't know if there's an answer to that. Maybe, I don't know if anybody else has an answer. So moving on, we're going to talk about the capital letters and how easy they are to teach in groups. So this is our line and curve group. We've got D, P, B, and R. Now, I have this little language on the side, but I just put that in there to remind me to talk about it as we're doing this webinar. Again, I really want you to use whatever language the child's handwriting program is using. And if their handwriting program doesn't have any language, like if it's just a random workbook, then I would copy the language from a good program. And many websites have their language available right on the website that you can download in a PDF. So for our D, P, B, and R, they're all capitals, so they're all tall letters. They're very easy to group together. D is a little different because it has a big curve, but we teach that first because bigger is easier for our kiddos. And that's why we teach them capitals first. P is a little curve, and then B is just a little bit added on. R goes back to P, and then it has a kick. That little diagonal can be tricky for kids sometimes, but when they go back to learning that it's P, and they build from there, they seem to conquer it. Our diagonal groups in capitals, they all start at the top and they slide down. Again, the one that I think is kind of tricky is the Y, because our kids always want to make a V. And then again, we have to think about the gaps. I'm trying to do it backwards. So if they make the little line down and then they're going from to the top and a big line down, as opposed to when they want to go really quickly and make a V and then go straight down. I mean, always, always, always ends up being some kind of a gap or some kind of a room for space in between that V, and it doesn't look as neat. Of course, it's not the end of the world if they don't make it properly, but it always ends up looking neater. And I really emphasize proper letter formation when I'm teaching it. We have our C, G, O, and Q letters. These are my favorites. Someone had said in the comments before they love Magic C. That's a Handwriting Without Tears term. I catch myself saying it a lot as well. I'm Handwriting Without Tears certified, but I've been trained in a few other programs as well. And the ones that are developmentally appropriate do always teach to group the letters by C. It's so much easier just to add that extra little oomph. Many times kids with these letters want to make an O. Like, so for example, when we get to lowercase a, our kids will want to make an O and then add a tail. When you really emphasize the fact that things start with C, it ends up being neater and easier for them. And this is the case for capital G as well. We start with a C, stop. Now all we have to do is add an up and an over. We want to make sure that we're emphasizing size. We want our kids to know that all the capital letters are the same size. They're all tall. Our numbers are all tall also. But we also want to make sure that we are teaching start spot. So our start spot, for the most part of capital letters, they start in the top left corner. And then we have our center starters, which are these guys, C, G, O, Q, S, and I, T, J, and A. So when we teach the developmental order, you'll see that these on the left tend to come first because we want the kids to have that habit of going up at the top and then starting their stroke. We want them to do the same movement over and over so that we can Mr. Miyagi them. So this is a quick reference sheet that is included in the freebie packet. The one that is on my screen right now has this major, major faux pas. Can anyone see it? I'll be so excited because I know that my OTs right here are going to find it immediately. Oh, I went smaller, so you can't see it. Hold on. There's a big old faux pas on the lowercase starting point. Something is majorly wrong, and I know that my OT friends are going to see it quickly. Oops. Did anyone say it? No. So it's lowercase d because it's so common to make an error with lowercase d. Many people think that it starts at the top, or many kids, I should say, start the D at the top. D always, always, always starts with a C. So if you have downloaded the freebie packet in the last hour, you should have the correct version. But before that, we had the start spot in the wrong spot. And I'm going to, my fabulous and fantastic assistant, Kim, is so wonderful, but she's not an OT. So when she made this for me, she didn't realize. So we did upload the correct version. So you can either download the packet again, or if you want to email us at customerservice.com, we want to make sure that your packet with these 2 pages has the correct start spot. Look, see, I knew it. All my OTs are finding it. And I would have picked it out in a second as well. And it is important. So the reason why it's important to teach our kids that D starts with a C is because we don't want them to end up reversing it and making a B. You can get the freebie packet in the Facebook group. There's a link right in there. Or you can just go to my website, missjamieot.com, and it is in my shop. It's called Teaching Letter Formations in Groups, and it's on sale for free. Okay, so you can get that there, but it's also going to be, the link will also be posted in this group after, or I think it's posted there right now, so you can get that. And it's a 30-page packet, so I think personally that it's full of really good stuff. But back to D, yes, very important. We need to make sure that our kids are starting with a C, because then they're not going to reverse it. They know C, they've been practicing C, they know C because they learned it for capitals, and then they learned it to make A and to make G. So we want to make sure that they start with a C so that it's just up, down, and then their D won't become a B. If they started at the top, very often they end up making a B or a 6. So we don't want that. Someone said W, but W is correct. Okay. So this little cheat sheet, I think, is a great either a worksheet to work on with your kids to practice start points and to teach letter size, or a great handout to give to parents to have, as a reference when they're working with their children, or for teachers, for therapists to give to teachers just as a quick reference guide. Sometimes we forget that teachers and adults aren't trained in handwriting like we are. Um, Actually, research shows that I think it's 30% of classroom teachers report that they don't have any training in handwriting. It's not something that is even addressed in handwriting in education programs. So I know I went back and got my master's in special education, and there was absolutely no mention of handwriting until the one class that I had at the end. When the teacher found out that I was an OT, she asked me if I would do like a webinar for the rest of the graduate students who were going to be special ed teachers on handwriting, and I gladly did, because I wanted them to know the information, and they didn't know this at all. So that's unfair to the teachers as well, that this isn't included in their education programs for the most part. When it comes to lowercase, we can relax a little bit because our kids already know a bunch of the letters. Our mini-me letters are the same letters in capital and lowercase. So they already know them. They just have to now practice making them a little smaller. And now that they have been practicing writing, we are hoping their dexterity is a little better. They've gotten a little more skilled. Hopefully they're using their fingers and their muscles and their hands a little better. So it'll be easier for them to make them a little smaller. But all of these letters, C, O, S, V, W, X, and Z, make up 27% of the alphabet. So of the lowercase alphabet. So they start off their lowercase education already being a quarter of the way done. Isn't that awesome? So then you have your starts with C letters. And again, some of these are repeats. They already know C, they already know O, but I go over them again because I want them to understand that A and D and G all start with C. So I always, and there's a page included in your freebie packet to teach C and then A and then C and then O. And you can teach capital C and lowercase c together as well. They are the same motor movement. So it's still building motor memory. It's still using motor learning theory. E, I say, is the tricky letter. Whoops, sorry about that. E is the tricky letter. It starts in its own spot. It's the only one that doesn't start where it's supposed to. And it definitely could be tricky. There's nothing to group it with. I have seen teachers accidentally make a C and then add a line. And that's E is actually one of the most frequently used lowercase letters. So it's really important that our kids get it. We've got a lot of work in order for our kids to get that. It's just harder. Then we have our driving down letters like R, N, M, H, B, and P. And H and B are taller letters, while P is a small fall letter, or you may say descending, depends on what program you're using. But they're all the same movement. So once our kids get that down, it's so easy for them to learn how to make N once they've learned R. And then M is just N with another bump, and etc. They're all the same movements. Straight line letters, we have I, L, and T and J. So T is generally taught completely straight, and J we know has a curve, but it still starts exactly like lowercase I. So it's so easy to group those guys together and to have our kids feel successful. The diagonal lowercase letter, I have Y here. Capital Y and lowercase y are not the same because capital Y generally is the V with the line, where lowercase y is, I'm trying to do it backwards for you guys, the one line and then the long line. So V, W, X, and Z are mini-me letters, and our kids have already learned them, but it's always great to practice them together and to have them practice making them smaller. Then we have our unique lowercase letters. F starts in a funny spot, and it's really, some people could say it's similar to T, but we don't want our kids to make a T and then go back and add a hook. When they get faster, it's not going to look good. It won't be legible. And we also don't want to teach Q right at the same time as teaching G because it does encourage reversals. Q is very infrequently used, while G is pretty common. So it's good to use Q at the end. You can review C again and teach kids that Q is a magic C letter or a letter that starts with C, but it's not, I would use it by itself and not teach it with the group just so that they don't end up reversing and mixing it up with G and Q. Okay. Just going to check to see if anybody's got questions about any of those. Oh, I'm sorry. My website address is covering important stuff. Yes. Got it. Thank you for telling me. Cindy is saying that you just downloaded the freebie again and the D is still incorrect. So I know that my fantastic, fabulous Kim has changed that. So I'm some sure that it should be changed, but if not, we'll fix it and we'll get everybody the right one. Someone's saying for lowercase e, someone taught me the phrase walk out on the diving board, jump up into the air and splash into the water. That's very cute. And I know that Handwriting Without Tears has said as well that you hit the ball and then run around the bases. And that's one that is a good trick for E. The free references for this, again, are in the free Facebook group. Once you get out of this webinar, the link for it is in the Facebook group. You can also go to my website. So someone's saying, Brian Tizio, everything I've always learned states UC, but handwriting patch program states lowercase first because that is what the children see all the time. How do you feel about that? Personally, I understand where it is, and I think it's okay because lowercase letters are frequently used so much more. Lowercase letters are used, just a million times more than uppercase. So I think that if we're in a position where we need to push our kids and they've got to learn all of these things and they've got to learn them quick, then a Facebook user, you're looking at the workbook and not the freebie. I'll get to you at the end. I'll get all of you guys the freebie packet at the end. But so Brian Tizio brings up a great comment, and it's just that we're teaching our developmentally, we're saying it's easier to teach capitals because they're larger and they have simpler strokes, but they're not as commonly used. So again, if you are in a position where you've got to push through by teaching the kids these letters in groups, you're helping them to be more successful. So if you have to do lowercase first, I think it's not the end of the world. I think it's important to really make sure that they do master them and that they're not like flying through it because lowercase letters require a lot more movement, a lot more dexterity, and a lot more sequencing of different strokes. So it's going to be hard for a 5-year-old to get that. We need to understand that it's not going to look perfect. They're not going to have it on the lines. They're not going to have them all the right sizes or the right placements. But if we're pushing motor memory and motor learning, and you have to do lowercase first, I would say do it in groups because you're accomplishing more and you can spend what little time you do have on more letters in less time. Someone's just said, what about for lefties? So all of this is completely applicable to lefties. The only difference with lefties is that you can teach them if you want, or if you see that they're doing it on their own. When it comes to horizontal lines, like if we think of the letter E, when it comes to E, there's the lines across. We would teach our kids to start at the big line and then go across. And for lefties, it's easier for them to pull in than it is to push out because they're going from the other side, if that makes sense. So in general, for a righty, we're going to teach them to make their line down and then do the 3 lines. For lefties, they can pull in and go with the opposite direction. I wish I had something where I could write on the board and show what I'm talking about. That's really the only other trick that I would say for lefties. But there are a lot of letters that have horizontal lines. So if you think of E and T and H and A and I, any horizontal line that they need to make, they should be permitted to go in the opposite direction than everybody else because it's easier for the fingers to pull than it is to push. So this is the page that is in the freebie packet of CADGO. I've been using this with my kindergarten kids. So going to what Brian said, I have to admit that I skipped capitals because my kindergarten kids are learning how to, well, the kindergarten teachers are modeling sentences soon, like in 2 weeks. So I want them to know how to make these letters, and I'd rather practice with them these 5 letters than teach them capital letters that they're not going to be used as much. And my kindergarten teachers in general, they don't want the kids right. They don't want the kids writing in capital letters, even though that's what developmentally is appropriate. They want the children writing in lowercase letters because they feel like it's a better habit. So for my kindergarten kids this year, I started with these big groups because once I was through with the groups, the children had so much more of a percentage of the letters mastered. And again, these sheets are great for putting in a paper protector. You can use dry erase. You can do it with crayons. You can do it with wiki sticks, toothpicks, and Play-Doh, anything that you want to just get those letters on, teach them how to do it and where it starts and what movement to do next. So these are the driving down letters. One of my favorite tricks I tell kids, because again, I find that they do pencil pickups, and I don't blame them because for capital P, we teach them to pick up the pencil. But for the rest of the letters, when it comes to lowercase, now we don't want them to pick up the pencil as much because it takes longer. And as they get faster at writing, we want them to make continuous strokes. It's faster and it ends up being neater. But I find that a lot of children still pick up. So for R, they would do a line down and then they would pick up and add a hook. And this would end up usually with the hook being too big, or there would be a gap in between their little line and their hook, and it would be hard to understand what it is. So I always teach my kids about the trampoline and the trampoline trick. They're starting at the top, and when they get to the bottom, they are picturing a trampoline. They get to bounce off the trampoline and go back up. So they have to boing up and over. And they love to make the noise. I'm sure kindergarten teachers wouldn't like all of their kids boinging, but when you're in a one-to-one OT session or if you're a parent working with a child at home, this is a great little trick to help kids remember that they go down and they boing back up and over. And these letters all have the same movements, even though they end up being different letters. So L, T, I, and J, as I said before, sometimes T is shown with a hook, but in general, we don't teach our kids to write it that way. We usually teach them with just a straight line. And I always teach my kids that for I and J, it's just a polka dot, not a lollipop. And I very often will do something where I'm showing them which one I like, and I'll make a nice pretty little eye, and then I'll make an eye with a big blob at the top, and it's touching the straight line down, and I ask them to choose which one is the polka dot, which one is the lollipop. And we like to eat lollipops, but we don't like to write them. So they like that cute little trick as well. And a lot of other handwriting programs have cute little letter stories that make it stick. So these are our mini-me letters. We have these as well in the workbook. So it's just teaching the same letter over and over, but doing big and then small. So it's emphasizing the same formation, just changing the size. Diagonal lowercase. Once they learn how to make a V, very easy to change it into an W. X is the stroke down. Y is the same, but the second line crosses in a different spot. So you want to keep it simple when you're teaching children how to write. If possible, I like to use highlighter or I like to use outlines like this A all the way on the right because I want to see what the child is drawing. The problem with highlight is that it's tricky to use with more than one child because it doesn't photocopy well. And who has time to sit there and highlight all these worksheets and all these things that you need to do? So that could be tricky if you're working with more than one student or if you're expecting a lot of letters. Very often we'll see something like what's on this left side, A, which is in dotted lines, and we'll have a start spot. We'll might have arrows. We might have numbers, 1, 2, 3, do this, do that, go there, go here. That's confusing for our kids. And it's a lot visually. We know that we have many children who are distracted by visual stimuli and they can't kind of make sense of it all. This might not really make a lot of sense to them. So it might make sense to us grown-ups. We can follow directions. We understand that 1 comes before 2 and that green might mean go while red means stop. But our little ones don't know that. It doesn't mean anything to them and it can just be visually confusing. So we also need to look back at our visual milestones that we talked about in the beginning from Beery 2010. By the age of 5.11, children are supposed to be able to guess something that's half done. Again, that's only if they know what it is. So if they don't look at these 2 dotted lines and this dotted line here and automatically know that it's an A, it's not going to make any sense to them to try to complete it. By 4.5, they should close something up. So if the child is just closing something up, working on visual closure, he's not really working on making the strokes and learning how to make the letter formations. He's sometimes just concentrating on connecting the dots and closing it up. So for my personal preferences, I always like to go where I can see what the child's pencil line looks like. When it's dotted lines like this, it's hard to see if maybe they picked it up. If you're not sitting right over them, it's hard to see where they might have picked it up, if they're pressing too hard, if they're pressing too light, anything like that. If it's highlighted or if it's an outline, then you can really tease out exactly what it is that they're doing with their pencil. Plus, it's easier for them to see. Some of my middle school, someone's saying, some of my middle school students start letters from the bottom. Is it worth trying to change? No. It's way too late. Just concentrate on neatening up what they can do. I actually have a post on my website, missjamiot.com, called How to Improve Horrendous Handwriting When All Hope is Lost. And it's all about the tricks that I learned working in middle school. There is hope to improve their legibility, but it's not by changing their letter formations. So I want to also talk about self-evaluation. So research shows that a lot of handwriting programs include a self-evaluation component and that kids should be expected to self-monitor and correct their written work. So if we look back at the programs that we're familiar with, they may be look at the letter, which one is your favorite, circle the one that you did the best, or something like write it and check that you understand how to make it or something like that on the page. We want the kids to get in the habit of looking back at what they've done, being proud of it, and also being able to correct their errors. So it's important for us to teach them what the errors are. Now, this can be tricky for a kindergarten teacher who has, let's say, between 18 and 26 kids. It's a lot easier for us parents or for a therapist who's working with a small group. But things that do work are visual cues. I'm a huge fan of visual cues, especially for everybody in the class. It's okay to give something to one child if that one child needs it because you're individualizing something, but it also doesn't hurt to make it a universal program that everybody has a handwriting checklist on their desk. For older kids, I want you to all check that you wrote on the lines, check that the tall letters are tall and the small letters are small. Sometimes the kids just need that extra little bit. And when they're in the mode of doing their best and putting forth their best work and making sure that they're pleasing you, then having a visual cue of exactly what you expect is really helpful. On the left side is just a simple I'm writing neatly sheet, just walking around the classroom and catching a child making a letter correctly or catching them self-correcting their work. Maybe they look at their sheet and they realized that a letter is floating or that a letter is going underneath the line, and just give them a star on one of those little numbers. And that can be a huge self motivator for our little guys. These two reward sheets, these visual cues, are also in your freebie packet. I've had a lot of luck with these. I find that they work. So we're getting towards the end. We're just going to wrap up some of the main concepts that we've gone over. For uppercase letters, our straight line letters, very easy to teach together, are F and E, piece of cake. D, P, B, and R, also a piece of cake. Someone had said something about why isn't R after P? You can teach it that way. It doesn't really matter. B and R both start with a P. So generally, if I was doing a whole worksheet, I would teach the letter P and then I would teach either B or R. But before either B or R, I would review P, just to go back to our cheerleader of getting that one movement down that they feel good about, and then teaching them that there's just an extra curve or just an extra little kick. And then we have our pencil pickup diagonals, N and M. Those are easy to group together as well. And our unique uppercase letters, they're not as easy to group, but they do all start in the same spot. So they are easy to kind of blend in with a different group. Or you can teach them individually if you wish. Our diagonal letters, very easy to teach together. V, W, X, Y, Z, all start at the top left. So we have this little chart right here that shows you the colors. And then we have our capital letters that start at the top center, C, G, O, Q, and S. Those are so easy to teach together. And some of them are mini-me letters. And then we have our center starting letters, A, I, T, and J. I, T, and J are very easy to teach together. It's obvious why they are similar in formations. A is kind of a unique guy. When it comes to our lowercase letters, as I said, when we start to teach lowercase, we've got a huge kind of leg up, because when we learned the capitals, we learned some of the letters that are identical to their uppercase. So these, I call them mini-me letters. Some other programs might call them something else, but you can review it with the capital or you can review it in the group that it goes with. The starts with C letters are important to go over a lot. They're very commonly used. Remember, don't teach Q here because it's very infrequently used and we don't want our kids to confuse it with G. E is a tricky letter. It should be taught by itself and it needs a lot of practice. R, N, M, H, B, and P, driving down letters, or in Handwriting Without Tears, they're dive down letters. They start at the top, drive down, back up and over. You can use the trampoline trick for these letters. I find it works great. Then we've got our straight line letters, I, L, T, and J, and our diagonal lowercase, which most of them we already learned with when we learned capitals because a lot of them are mini-me's. And then we have our unique lowercase letters, U, F, Q, and Y. When I teach Q, it's usually at the end after they've learned almost all the other letters. I review C and then I teach them Q. So the bottom line, when you're teaching letters in groups, you want to build on the previous learned skills. We want to make sure that our kids are using their muscle memory, that they're using their motor learning, and that they're feeling successful because they're just going one step further than what they learned and mastered previously. Practice makes perfect, but we don't want our kids writing pages and pages. That's not helpful either. 6 weeks is enough time to see a difference in most kids, according to research. That's if you're providing formal instruction and enough time to practice and master the skills before moving on to the next lesson. Repetition helps to build motor memory. So we remember, we've got to Mr. Miyagi them. We've got to do it over and over until they get it and it's just a piece of cake. So all of these references, I've got a lot, are available in your freebie packet. If there was anything that you wanted to review or anything that you wanted to look up, I do like that Hoy et al. Article, which is here, a systematic review of interventions. That was a really good article. But these are all listed in your freebie packet. My goodness, pages and pages. So thank you for attending, everybody. I really appreciate you all staying on. I know it's been a long night. What is the best way to facilitate motor planning? So motor planning, practice. The best way to facilitate motor planning is practice and repetition. If you were here for the beginning where I talked about the cheerleader, she learned one little step of the cheer, and then the next day she practiced it and learned one more little step. You want to practice things over and over again and help the kids to master it so that they feel successful. How do we get CEUs? There is a link again in my shop, and it's posted in our Facebook group, this free webinars Facebook group, where you can get the CEUs. You're going to purchase the assessment and take the assessment because it's an AOTA approved CEU program. Thank you guys all so much for attending. I really appreciate it. Where is lowercase k? Let me go back. I don't think that lowercase k is a mini-me because he's supposed to touch the top and the bottom, but his second diagonal starts at the middle line. Capital K, the second diagonal starts at the tip top. I'm doing it reversed for you guys. So capital K and lowercase k are not exactly the same. It's kind of similar to Y, where it's similar but not identical. Are the CEUs live? I'm not sure what you mean, Dana Schachter Ball, but if you watched this webinar, you can purchase the assessment and take it. And this webinar will be available as a replay within this group for a few weeks. So you have a few weeks to take the assessment and pass it. You have to get a 70%, and then you'll get your CEU certificate delivered automatically. As I said before, guys, if you have an issue or something doesn't get delivered, definitely check your spam and your junk. The internet loves to send me to people's garbage. But if you need to contact me, please contact my customer service at Miss Jamie OT. I get so upset when I check like my Facebook message or my Instagram page or something, and I find a message from weeks ago, and then people think I'm not getting back to them. It's not on purpose. I just have too many areas of connection, and I'm just me. So, and my fabulous Kim. But I'm very happy to help you with anything that you need. If there's still something going on with that upload and the lowercase, the cheat sheets, we'll download it on its own and upload the proper start spot for that lowercase d in the group. Okay? So Sally Mendez, all of the letters, not every single letter is in that freebie packet. The freebie packet is the most common groups and the easiest letters to teach. The lowercase k is in the workbook, but it's by itself because it is a little bit unique. Oh, I see what you're saying, that my lowercase key is not in there. I'm going to put him with unique lowercase. K is unique lowercase because it's not. Okay, Cindy just downloaded it for a third time and it's fine. So the cheat sheet is corrected with the start spot for D in the right spot. Tanya Sirocco, such a great webinar. Thank you, Tanya. I appreciate you coming here. You're the best. Viviana, thank you. You're welcome, and I really appreciate it. Does anybody have any other questions? Donna Bravador Palmer says, I really enjoy this webinar. Thanks, Donna. I'm really glad that you did. I was hoping that you guys would, and I find this method of teaching the letters just easier, and I find that I accomplish so much more, and my kids feel successful, and that's the most important part. Okay. I'm so glad that you guys are appreciating it. So, as I said, this webinar is going to be in this group for a few weeks. So, if you have any friends that you think would appreciate the webinar or that would like it or would learn from it, please feel free to share this group. I would love more people to get this information. It's going to help our kids and our teachers to help our kids. And I mean, that's the goal, isn't it? We're all on the same team and we need to make sure that our kiddos are feeling successful. They've been through a lot in the past year and we want to make sure that we catch them up and that they're not falling behind. Facebook user who couldn't get the freebie packet, please check your spam. And if it's not there, then email customer service at missjamieot.com. We will get it to you. It might be something with your email blocking me or sending me to junk. Thanks everybody for all the webinars. Tamara Letsky, I hope I'm saying it right. I'm going to spread the word with the special ed teams I work with. Awesome. Spread the word and get that freebie packet out there. Lisa Clee saying, what age do you typically stop working on letter formation? Well, me as an occupational therapist, I end up working on it for a while, but I think you're talking about teachers in general. When should teachers stop working on letter formation? That has also changed over the years. In the past, teachers were still practicing penmanship and handwriting up until like 7th or 8th grade. And that's why people's handwriting was so neat and so different. Nowadays, again, there's less time targeted towards handwriting instruction. So the other things take over. I would say teachers start cursive around 2nd or 3rd grade if they even do teach cursive. But I think the practicing of the lowercase letters and the capital letters, once the children have kind of gotten it, they end up just dwindling it and trying to integrate it into the children's curriculum because they have so much to cover. Teresa Uraby, you're always so helpful and appreciative. Thank you. That's so nice. Alexa Rossi, have I approached any teachers with my method? Any feedback from them? Yes, I actually just gave the kindergarten teachers in my building that I work with the freebie packet and the group sheets, and they were happy with it. They were excited because they feel stressed with the manner and the pace that they're supposed to be going at in order to conquer everything, and they know that they're supposed to keep up with this, but they also know that the kids aren't developmentally mastering it. So they want to have a way of getting the kids to do better. And this seems to be working pretty well. Someone saying, have I ever done a webinar to a classroom teacher on this topic? I have done so many handwriting webinars in my school district. Yeah, 1 million. Mary Kavanaugh Altina, you spoke about working with middle school students on difficulty with handwriting. Yes, I did. I've written 2 very lengthy blog posts about the tips and tricks that I used when I worked in a middle school. Many of my students had difficulty with handwriting. I don't feel it's beneficial to spend time trying to change their letter formations because they've developed automaticity, meaning they have been writing those letters that way forever. And it's very difficult to ask them to change that. But there are a lot of things you can do to still improve the legibility, make it easier to read and easier for other people to read. On my website, missjamieot.com, there are 2 blog posts geared specifically towards handwriting and middle schoolers. Just go in the search bar at the top and put in middle school, and you should find them both in a second. Okay, guys, so I think that is it. I am so grateful for your time, and I really appreciate you tuning in and staying here for an hour and 50 minutes. Oh my goodness. And do make sure that you get your freebie packet. I really want to make sure that you're able to use these sheets again and again. If you want more than just those groups of letters and you want every single page, check out my workbook. And if you are interested in the CEUs, then you can also just take the assessment and you would get the slides for this webinar as well. Okay. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful night, everybody.